G'day legends. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at my methods for tuning vocals within Melodyne. Back when I got it around 15 years ago or whatever, I just dived in and started using it. There wasn't any tutorials on YouTube or whatever to watch. It was basically just figure it out. And so after a bit of time using it, I got a bit of a method going, and I've pretty much just been using that method since forever. And I've never really felt the need to change the way that I tune vocals because no one has ever complained about the way that their vocals have been tuned in my mixes. So with that said, let's dive into this. When I think about tuning vocals in Melodyne, I feel like there's two methods here. There's two approaches that you can take. One is the natural approach, and that's going to take you the longest amount of time. It's when you're going to go through, manually move everything a little bit, just try and make it as transparent as possible so that it doesn't really sound like you've done any tuning at all. So this is going to be a more organic sound. It might not be completely perfect, but it's going to sound pretty good and pretty natural. But again, this is going to take you a lot of time. The second approach is the quick approach. And this is the method that I generally opt for most of the time. Being a business, you got to get things done quickly. You don't have hours and hours upon time to spend being nitty gritty about tuning. And to be honest, the only people who really care about this are you. If it's your song, you're the only person who cares. I know when I tune my own vocals, I care the most about it. No one else cares. So it's a really personal thing. So if you're self-producing at home, then that's great. You have all the time in the world to be as nitty-gritty about your tuning as possible. If you're running a studio or mixing business, you don't really have time to do that unless someone's happy to pay for the hours and hours upon time it takes to do a really slow manual vocal tune. Now, the quick method is still actually not even that quick. It still takes a fair bit of time, especially when you've got a lot of vocals. Tuning just takes a lot of time. So first of all, let's talk about two ways we can get our vocals into Melodyne. So I've got a song here that I've got to mix, and it's kind of half done. It's on its way, but it's not all the way there yet, and we still need to tune the vocals. So I'm going to load up Melodyne as my first plugin. I always like to leave a gap at the top here so I can select all the channels and just chuck Melodyne in. I know someone has commented before saying you don't need to leave a gap, but the problem is if you want to add Melodyne to all of these tracks at once, so for example in Logic you can click just above the plugin, this little line here, and you can add in any plugin you want. So I can add another channel EQ, and it's going to slot it in and move all the plugins down. But if you try and do that on multiple channels at once, it only does it on the channel that you're doing it on. So you can't load Melodyne onto 20 channels at once. So that's why I like to leave a plugin gap at the top of my vocals so that when I'm ready, I can come in, I can come down to Ceremony, and I can load in Melodyne. Now you can see we've got two options here. We've got ARA, and then we've just got Melodyne. Now ARA is your quick option. When you load this up, it's going to automatically read all of the vocals and just chuck them into Melodyne, and you can start working on them straight away. If you then go and change one of those vocal tracks and like pick a different comp, it will update in Melodyne and add that back in, and then obviously you'll just have to retune it. But the problem is ARA can be a little bit buggy. So even though you get that immediate speed boost where you can just start tuning things straight away, sometimes you come back to a session and the ARA is bugged out and all of your edits are gone. That's why I just don't like using ARA. Unless I'm trying to do something really quick and then I bounce it in place, and then I'm done with it, and I know I've got a hard copy of it there. But otherwise, with Melodyne, I just stick with the old method, which is going to cost me about 3 minutes. So I'm going to load up the normal instance of Melodyne here. So we can see all of our vocal tracks here. I'm just going to arm all of these to press the little record button. And then I just need to play the track from the beginning, let it go all the way through, and it's going to record the vocals into Melodyne, and then they will be there permanently. This method is tried and true. You know that these vocals are not going to disappear, and you're not going to lose all of the hours of edits that you're going to put into this. Okay, so vocals start here. And then we're just going to hit play.
Moving as one, standing together, fighting for a cause that we all believe in. Yeah!
So now that the song's done playing through, we can see that Melodyne has mapped out all of our vocals here for us. So I'm using Melodyne Studio. So the cool thing about that is I can view all the vocals at once. So if I click on these grayed out audio symbols here, I can see all the vocals in the one window, and I can edit them all in the one window just by clicking on the orange symbol. I can switch between vocals and choose what I want to tune. So to start with, let's take a look at tuning our lead vocal. So the first thing that I like to do is I go through and I split any notes that need to be split. So Melodyne does a pretty good job, but occasionally there's notes that aren't split. Some notes sound better when you don't split them, but we're just going to go through, take a bit of a guess at which ones we think need splitting. Like this one here, potentially that. Definitely this. Sometimes these are best left alone, but let's split that one and see how it turns out. You can always join these back up. Now, the tool that I'm using is the note separation tool. So you can just right click and you get that. Definitely that and that. So I'm just going to work my way through and just split up these notes. Now what we need to do is know the key of the song. This one is in E major. So we're going to switch this over to E major. Melodyne tries to guess what the key is based on where all the notes sit. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Now if we were doing the natural method, what we would start doing is we'd zoom in, we'd move over onto our pitch tool, and then we would start working our way through just listening and adjusting.
Coming closer.
So you see that note just didn't quite get there. This one's a little flat.
Coming closer.
This first note's not right either.
Coming closer.
So same deal, we could push that up a little bit.
We're there desperate. We're there desperate.
It sounds better on the E.
We're there desperate.
Maybe bring that down a smidge.
We're there desperate.
Bring that up a bit. So it's small moves, but we're kind of bringing it all together.
Coming closer, we're there desperate.
You know, and if we felt like we needed to, we could move into the modulation tool. So again, right-clicking, coming down to pitch modulation, and we could pull this in a little bit.
They're desperate.
Make it sound a little tighter, a little less vibrato going on. We could come down to the pitch drift tool and say like this one. We can see it drifts a little bit at the end. We can just pull on that down a bit and sort of line it up a bit better.
Coming closer, we're there desperate.
And so on and so forth. You can work your way through the track. It's going to take you forever, but you'll get a cool result at the end. You can be as meticulous as you want and really get it to sound exactly the way that you want. So let's undo all of that. I'll just highlight all of these and go right click, restore, undo all pitch changes. Boom. Okay, back to normal. So that's how you go about doing the natural method. We're going to take a look at the quick method because this is the one that I use 99% of the time. So what we're going to do now is come up the top here and click on this symbol here. We're going to drag pitch center over to around 80%. You can see the notes, they're kind of just lining up. The pitch drift is going to play with the modulation and the drift. So let's have a look at what this does. It's not really over dramatic, but we're going to put this around like 50%. We'll be able to manually adjust the modulation more if we need to. So around 80%, 50%, that's kind of a pretty good starting point if the vocals are pretty on point, which these vocals, they're pretty good. First of all, we can see it's pushed this note down at the start, so we're just going to bring that one up a little bit, and we're going to bring this one up a bit as well. Now, if you hold down Option, you can click and drag, and you can just do like fine movements rather than kind of stepped motions. And you can see it's jumping within the key, which is helpful. But most of the time I'm holding down Option when I'm dragging things around. It does give it a more natural sound, and you can really fine tune where the notes sit.
Coming closer, we're there desperate, attempts to change. Attempts to change our course. Attempts to change our course. Coming closer, we're there desperate, attempts to change our course. Attempts to change our course. Attempts to change our course.
So after a few little tweaks, I think this sounds pretty good.
Coming closer, we're there desperate, attempts to change our course.
And again, if I want, I can grab that pitch modulation tool, tighten this note up a little bit.
Coming closer, we're there desperate, attempts to change our course.
I think that sounds pretty cool. And you can see this note here, I don't have it quite up on the A, like you can see the middle of the notes around the middle here. I feel like it sounds a little sharp when it's all the way on there.
Attempts to change our course.
Doesn't sound quite right down here.
Attempts to change our course.
Like I know he pushed the note up there.
Desperate attempts to change our course.
So I think that sounds right for what the singer's aiming for, and I think it sounds good. So then we just continue moving on through. And so we can see we got some notes here that might need shifting.
But don't forget why.
So probably bring that down.
But don't forget why you're here.
That sounds a little sharp at the top of the note.
Forget why you're here in the first place. Here in the first place.
So we can see this little like gliss here is like in between the A and the G sharp. Both of those notes are in the key of E. I'd probably just pull the modulation in a little bit and bring this closer to the G sharp.
In the first place.
Sounds a bit better to me.
After all, they start.
Bring that up a little.
After all, they start.
Probably tighten that up a smidge.
After all.
Because that's sounding a little tuned on this split here, we can grab our pitch tool. I'll zoom in. See this little yellow line here, orange line. We can get our mouse cursor onto that until we see that little symbol, and then we can drag, click and drag. And so if you do it hard like that, it's not going to put any like glide into the note, so it sounds really tuned.
After.
Probably not the best example. So we can make it a really sharp tuned note, it jumps to the next note, or we can add a bit of extra gliss to it. And sometimes that smooths out the tuning sound. So I'm going to drag that out a little bit.
After all.
Sounds perfect. This bit here, just tighten up a little bit with some modulation. I need to be saying more what I'm doing because this is so second nature to me. I right click and I'm on the pitch modulation tool and I'm just straight into it. Or I right click, drag down the pitch drift tool. You get really fast at using these tools after a while.
After all, they started this war.
That's all sounding pretty good. This bit here, again, we could drag this little gliss out a bit.
They started this war.
Sound a bit better to me. And for example, let's just hear that in the mix.
Coming closer with their desperate attempts to change our course.
Sounding pretty good. I feel like this note could be pushed a little harder, so I'm just going to double click it, snap it right into the center, and then just like get that pitch modulation and just squish it down a bit.
Coming closer with their desperate attempts.
That sounded better to me. But you can see, even a quick method, it's not that quick. You still have to do a bit of manual moving around, playing with the modulations and just adjusting the pitch centers as well until it sounds good. There's a bit of an art to it. But sometimes when things are dead center, they actually don't sound quite in tune because you can see like the modulation within the voice is going sharp or it's going flat. And so you have to find that sweet spot. Like this note might actually sound a bit better pulled down a little bit.
Attempts to change our course.
But basically you just move all the way through the track, just doing that, listening, checking how it sounds. I generally tune it by itself without the music behind it, and then I listen through with the music and hear if it's all sitting properly. It's just quicker to be able to double click in Melodyne.
But don't forget why.
Hear the playback, make adjustments, rather than kind of keeping on jumping up the top here in Logic and playing back, stopping, adjusting, playing back, stopping. Just gets a little bit tedious. Now I'm going to quickly tune the chorus so that we can have a look at how we tune harmonies as well. One thing I'll note up here with getting a bit of an automatic setting happening is you can choose to do snap to chord scale. And so when we click that, you can see some of these notes change their position because those notes are actually sitting out of key. So that is an option. I find that if you do that, sometimes it does start to sound really tuned. And sometimes some of those notes that are a little bit off, they just might be like a glide into a note. Sometimes they sound fine as is, and it creates a little bit of like organicness by leaving that stuff in there. I typically like to just leave it and make the call as I go through rather than just snapping it to and not having a choice. For example, this note here.
It's strength that binds us.
It's sitting on a G, but you can see that the modulation moves down into the F sharp, which is in the key of E, and then it jumps up to our G sharp. So it's just kind of like a little gliss into the G sharp. Have a listen to what it sounds like when we put it on the F sharp. So this is in key.
Strength that binds us.
It sounds really like the tunings. You can hear it working there. It doesn't sound quite right. It sounds better on the G.
Strength that binds us.
Sounds more natural. Still sounds great. Still sounds in tune. Sometimes those little imperfection things actually make it sound better. This note here has a fair bit of vibrato on it.
And is not an option.
Verging on like a little too much, I reckon we could just grab our modulation tool, pull it in a tiny bit. You got to be careful because you can really hear pitch correction on vibrato when you really try and flatten it out. It becomes really obvious. So just a little bit, even getting that pitch drift tool just to tidy up the end a little bit. You can see we're pulling that back in. See, it was a little sharp at the end. Let's see how that sounds.
Surrender's not an option.
That sounds better to me. Still sounds natural. Have a listen to what it sounds like if we just like push it a little too far, like bring it in a bit too much.
Surrender's not an option.
You can hear like there's a weird digital sound about it. Definitely don't do that. Keep it natural, people.
Surrender's not an option.
Sounds way better than overtuning it. If you're tuning vocals and you're doing this, you're going through and flattening everything out, then yes, it's going to sound tuned.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
Like, that sounds terrible.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
Sounds way better. Definitely don't overcook it with the pitch modulation tool. Try and fix as much as possible with the pitch center and then do little adjustments with the modulation if it still sounds a bit pitchy. Okay, so I've got a chorus here all tuned up, ready to go. Let's find a harmony track. All right, here we go. Okay, these harmonies are double tracked left and right, but I'm just going to center it so it's not kind of annoying us jumping in left and right.
Surrender's not an option.
It's pretty on point.
In our fight for all, surrender's not an option. It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
Okay, so it's pretty close. Cool thing with Melodyne Studio, you can just double click on these grayed out areas and jump into that vocal. So really cool for just quick editing. Now we're going to do the same thing, grab the note separation tool and split up some notes here that need splitting. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm pretty ruthless with harmonies. I just tune them and make them sound good. The lead vocal gets a little bit more love than the harmonies do. So now that we've gone through and split out any of the notes that Melodyne has missed, I'm going to come up to our pitch correction tool up here, and we're going to drag this over to 100%, pitch drift to 100%, snap to chord, ruthless. Hit OK. Now I know some people won't like that, but you can experiment with this on your own. You can do 50%, you can do 80%. Do what works best for you. If the vocals are really good, just give them a little bit. If you want it to be a little natural with maybe a little bit of like pitchiness in it, if you like that kind of thing, go for it. But this is the quick method and it always sounds really good. And I've never had anyone say, hey, I don't like the way the harmonies sound. So here we go. Let's have a listen to what this has done.
Surrender's not an option. It's strength that binds us in our fight for all. Surrender's not an option. It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
Cool. It's kind of close. I'm not really sure about this harmony at the end. I might play around with this a little bit.
It's strength that
I feel like this note should come up.
It's strength that binds us in.
I almost feel like it should just all be on the E.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all. It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
Maybe bring this down. So you see we've got the little gliss here. We'll match that up with the harmony.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
That sounds good to me. Sounds harmonious. So maybe I've reworked that a little bit, but I actually think that's going to sound a whole lot nicer. Listening to it with just the lead vocal sounds way nicer to me. There's less sort of like discordance about it. There's that weird sort of like, is it a fourth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was like a 6, like weird note, whereas this is more like a 7th above.
It's strength that binds us in.
Obviously an E major should work really well because it's the key of the song. So let's have a listen to that with the music behind it, because that'll really tell us if this is working okay. It can sound good on its own, but it might sound terrible with all the guitars and everything.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
I like it. Let's hear how it originally was. Let's just undo the pitch centers.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
So you'd probably only get away with that kind of thing.
It's strength that binds us.
And I'm still not even sure if I like that note.
It's strength that binds us.
That's a winner to me. That's what I like hearing.
It's strength that binds us in our fight for all.
Awesome. Love it. Now, obviously, that's quick and easy because they're pretty close to the notes. So Melodyne got it 80% right then. It was just that last bit that needed a little bit of tweaking. And then you just move through and finish that harmony track off. Just do exactly what we did there for that chorus for any other section of the song where you've got a harmony on this channel. Now this is where Melodyne Studio becomes even handier, is because this is a double tracked harmony, I can load up the other instance of this harmony. So where's that double? I'm going to get rid of the lead vocal. So now we can just see this is our double track harmony here, and the grayed out one is the harmony we just tuned. So now I don't even have to really listen to this. I can just match this up to that. So let's just do our cuts. We cut here, just make sure everything is pretty much the same. Okay, gonna come up top, hit my tune, 100, 100, snap to scale, bang. Now let's look for any bits that look different. So down here, let's drag this guy down. Drag this guy down, up, drag it up, drag it up. This note looks funny. We'll have a look at that in a second. Might need to put a cut on here, but maybe this note's just a bit quirky. Might need to listen to it to see what it's doing.
In a fight for...
Yes, there's something funny going on with that one. We might have to cut it here and then just drag this up.
In a fight for all.
Problem solved. And sure, it sounds a little tuned, but man, in the background, have a listen. You're not even going to know.
It's strength that binds us in a fight for all.
Sounds great. Literally never in the history of any mix that I've ever done since I've been doing this has anyone said the harmonies sound too tuned. And this is the way that I do it.
Surrender's not an option.
Sounds sick, right? And so you can do the exact same thing. If you've got double tracks, you just load up the vocal that you've tuned. So this is our lead vocal. We've got a double. Let's find it. Let's get rid of these. There's our double track. Okay. And we can just go through and do the same thing. Anywhere where we need a cut, add it in. And just make sure that it's all going to match up nicely. If you don't do all the same sort of like cuts and like the little glisses on the vocals, sometimes you have to add them. Like let's see if we can find a point where we need to add one. So occasionally with double tracks, they might sing it slightly different. So for example, let's just say on the lead vocal, this note here had a gliss on it like that, little glide into the note. And then on the double track, they didn't have one. And so you're like, oh, this looks a bit different. And you can hear the little pitch clash there. Some people may like that. For me, I don't particularly like hearing that. So what I would do on my double track, because I know this is going to be quieter in the mix, I can manipulate this a lot more without attention being drawn to it because you're not really going to hear it that well. I can then just cut this. Even if it's a straight note, I would just cut it and then I just drag it down to match it up. And that way, when you listen to it, you're not going to get a little pitch blip here when one's glissing and one's hitting the note straight on. And so once you've gone through, made all your cuts, come at the top, and again, pretty much just like pitch center, pitch drift, I pretty much just smash it, just like 100% include notes. I mean, you can drag it back. It's the double track. It doesn't really matter too much. Just find like that sweet spot, what sounds good to you, and then hit okay, and then just go through and do all your fine tuning. So like dragging that up, matching that. You can see here, this is a bit off, so we drag that and match it up. So on and so forth, just work your way through until it's all done. So we've got our lead vocal, we've got our double, we can see it's all looking pretty good. You can't even see a lot of notes jumping out there, which is good. And then we've got our harmony, which looks nice and tight. And then we've got our double tracked harmony as well, and they're looking nice and tight together.
Surrender's not an option. It's strength that binds us in a fight for...
Awesome, sounding great. So that's pretty much my method for tuning vocals in Melodyne. It's not really that complicated. Just cutting out any notes that weren't split properly when it was transferred in, and then getting your key selected, using the automatic pitch correction tool, just sort of get it most of the way there, and then just doing all of the fine adjustments to tidy it up. If anything sounds too pitchy, just reset it, like I showed you before, just like highlight the notes, right click it, come on the arrow, restore original pitch, undo all pitch changes. You can undo any changes here as well. Undo all changes, there you go. There's plenty of other cool things you can do in Melodyne, like you can play with the formant, so you can like make the vocals tone change a little bit. You can play with the amplitude, so this vocal already has compression tracked into it, and it already sounds pretty good, so I'm literally not going to play with the amplitude here. Before I was tracking with a compressor, I used to play with the amplitude a little bit more in Melodyne, but tracking with a compressor fixes a lot of problems, so I rarely use the amplitude tool, though it is a very useful tool. And there's a timing tool. This is really cool, like if you have a double track that's not matching up properly. So for example, even like a harmony, let's grab this time tool and say, oh, look, this is a little short compared to this. So we can grab the end of this. That's the breathy end of that note. We grab this, drag it over. You can see it's sort of squishing that up, so we might need to drag that back out a little bit until it sort of matches up here. And then we can come over to our double track, do the same, drag that out a little bit until it matches up. That way you can get the timings of your harmonies and your lead vocals nice and tight. So that's again another thing that takes a bit of extra time, but if you want things to be like super tight, the timing tool is really helpful. Otherwise you can use something like Synchro Arts Vocaline to match stuff up a little bit tighter afterwards, which is usually what I prefer to do because it's quicker than kind of manually going through and doing these things one at a time. And even if you have like a lead vocal note that's a bit short, the timing stretch tool is actually really awesome in Melodyne. You can get away with stretching stuff with it sounding pretty natural. So definitely worth experimenting with if you feel like, oh, I wish that note was just held like half a second longer. You can easily drag it out a little bit. Sounds pretty good. So once you're done doing all of your edits in Melodyne, I highly recommend you bounce it in place, hard write it to a new audio file, and then hide that original one in the background so you can call upon it if you ever need to. So the way we would do that in Logic is we're going to bypass any plugins on our channel. So I've already turned off the channel EQ and the compressor I had on here. And I'm going to click on the channel here. It's going to highlight all of our audio regions, and then I'm going to press Control B and we're going to bounce this in place. You can label it if you want, and then source, mute. So we want to mute that one because we're going to tuck it away in the background, and then make sure you don't bypass effect plugins because that will bypass Melodyne. So we've already turned off all the plugins we needed to. And then include audio tail and file. You can leave that on, it's harmless. And then overload protection only, leave that on, even though we're not going to clip anyway. Hit OK. Now this is our new vocal track with all of the tuning hard written to it. And we can then drag over our settings. So we had an EQ and compressor. We can drag them back onto that new channel, turn them back on, and then we can turn off Melodyne on this track, press mute. And then in our global window, we're going to press H. It's going to open up the hide option. So then we click on that, and then we can hide it away. And you just do that for all of your vocals. So you will have a bunch of vocals hidden in the background, but if you ever felt like, oh, I need to go fix a tuning issue, you can just hit H, find it, go back into Melodyne, fix it up, and then bounce it in place again, and then hide it away again. One reason I like to do this rather than leaving Melodyne running, besides it uses a little bit of CPU, can get a little taxing, it also means that any edits that you do to the actual audio file will come through, because while Melodyne's on there, if you go in and start, oh, I want to cut out some breaths or get rid of this stuff, it actually won't do anything because it's just playing back what Melodyne originally captured. And so you can't actually edit the audio file while Melodyne's running. If you want to leave Melodyne running all the time and you don't want to bounce it in place, it's best to clean up your ins and outs, get rid of any noises, even like sort of dealing with breaths that are too loud, although you can do that in Melodyne with the amplitude tool. You can go through and cut the breaths out and turn them down. It's tedious work, and you can do it in the audio editor in Logic. When you double click on an audio file, this pops up, and then you can just go through and highlight and change the gain on these, set up shortcuts. It can become a really quick way of doing it. I find Melodyne takes longer because I've got all the shortcuts and this setup, so I could be, I want to turn this breath down 10 dBs, change gain, and then I can jump over to the next one, drag, hit the shortcuts, boom, 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 get it done. So figuring out your workflow can save you a lot of time. But you can do it in Melodyne. It's very off tangent. But I know someone's going to say, you can change the breaths in Melodyne. Yes, you can. You can dial down the S's and the T's in Melodyne as well if you want to do that as well. You can edit to your heart's desire in Melodyne. You can spend a year editing a vocal in Melodyne if you want, or you can use a de-esser. It's all about time, people. How much time do you have? But that's it. Pretty much once those tracks get bounced in place, Melodyne's hidden in the background. Rarely call upon it again. If you've been having a bit of trouble tuning in Melodyne, hopefully this video has helped you out a little bit. If you guys want to support this channel, check out the link in the description below to my website. Check out my range of drum samples and mixing courses. Grabbing any of those is a massive support. Also, anytime you need to grab a new piece of gear, just jump on any one of my videos and find that Sweetwater affiliate link in the description. Clicking on that link and then going and buying a piece of gear. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but a small commission comes back to the channel from any sale made, and that's just a really great way of showing your support. If you've been wondering how Melodyne compares to Logic's flex pitch, then check out this next video coming up.